So you wear a Superman hat for Captain America?
I don't judge.
Okay.
I'm wearing a Superman hat for Captain America because it's kind of like when you, at least in, our younger days, whenever I would go to see whenever I would go to a punk show, you never wore the T-shirt of the band you were going to see.
True.
You know what I mean? If I was going to see Newfound Glory, I didn't wear a Newfound Glory shirt. If I was going to see Blink, I didn't wear a Blink shirt. So if we're talking about Captain America, I'm not going to wear a Captain America hat. You know what I mean?
Right. I just looked in my closet and was like, it's literally the only article of clothing you have that is both red, white, and blue.
I have Captain America socks somewhere.
With that, should we start the show?
We can definitely start the show, and then I'm going to tell you about the coffee I'm drinking right now.
Ooh, okay.
You going to kick us off?
Yes. Welcome, boys and girls, to a fantastic episode of the Sanctum Sanctorum Podcast, where comics and Christ culture collide. I am one of your hosts, Joey.
I am the other host, Chris.
Happy 4th of July weekend,
yes.
Whenever you're consuming this. Happy birthday, America.
It's 4th of July for us.
I don't know if we have international listeners.
I guess maybe not. To the one Canadian that might be listening.
Actually, I take it back. There are Canadians that listen. And so, mount up.
There we go.
There we go. Tell me about your coffee.
Listen, well, speaking of Canadian, when I went to the doctor yesterday, and I had some time to kill, and so I went to a nearby bagel shop that also brewed its own coffee and put them in K-cup pods. And I was very intrigued at the fact that they had a maple bacon coffee. And it is...
Oh, boy.
A delight. It is an utter...
It's the gateway to the good life.
It's an utter delight, and I fully recommend it. It's the Bagel Nook in Freehold, New Jersey. So go and check it out.
Shouts out to the Nook. Like we said, it is America's birthday, and we are covering Captain America, the First Avenger. I got some feelings about it.
Avenger.
The very first one. But we got a comic culture moment of the day. And Chris, did you know that
probably
certain movies, certain superhero movies require approval from the U.S. government to use their gear, their vehicles, locations, and because of that relationship...
Just to understand, it certainly required them to use, like, government vehicles in the movie. So if they want a scene of the military, they need permission to do that.
Yes.
Got it.
They want the military being used, if they want to portray the military in their movie, in any regard. The U.S. military has the ability to greenlight that or veto that based on the way the script portrays the U.S. military.
Interesting.
How do we feel about that? The Department of Defense exchanges script oversight for use of their toys, essentially. And if they don't like it, they can pull support, which then forces rewrites, reshoots. Essentially, they can sort of influence the narrative. The rise of the MCU sort of talks about this, and it shows up in a bunch of different movies. It's in Iron Man. It's in not so much Captain America, like the movie we're talking about today, but Captain Marvel for sure. Mm-hmm. There's a ton, and we don't really think about how involved and maybe subconscious the U.S. military plays a role in these films. And it's just an interesting question.
If you think about big budget if we're talking just like big budget, like kind of geek movies that have the military involved, like just about any sci-fi movies like the Transformers movies, most of the Marvel and DC movies have some kind of military presence in them. So yeah, so they're, if that's the case, then their hands would be kind of all over geek movies. Now, how do I feel about it? I would say that there's a mixed feeling, and here's why. I think that if you were making a biopic, I just saw the trailer for the biopic of Bruce Springsteen. All right.
Yeah.
And
Looks great.
if he read, it looks terrific. But if the real Bruce Springsteen read the script and said, you know what, this doesn't really accurately portray this part of my life or how I write songs or my relationships or whatever aspect, I would think because it's a movie that's portraying him, he would have a right to kind of say, I need this to be more accurate because it's representing me. So, I mean, I guess you could argue that, because you're portraying an entity, they want to be accurately portrayed. Actually, there is a great example of this. So, if you've ever seen this show, Modern Family,
Yes.
it's an ABC show, and like with many ABC sitcoms, they did a Disneyland episode.
Okay.
But because of the way that the characters are in that show, they argued that we're very, some of them can be very negative, and they said we want to be complaining about it's too hot, there's too much walking, everything is too expensive. So they were able to negotiate with Disney how the park was portrayed so that it was true to the show and the characters, but it wasn't like degrading the experience of the park. In that sense, you have this entity that's being portrayed, and if it's especially going to be shown to American and foreign audiences, the military obviously isn't going to want to be, seen in a movie where it's bashing the military. You know what I mean?
Totally. And that brings up another interesting question of like, these films often portray America and American military power as the moral authority. It's a very gray and muddy issue, but villains are terrorists and they're aliens or they're rogue governments, but the heroes are American-backed tech billionaires and they're justice approved. That's not always the case in real life, as we know and are currently experiencing in our modern day. And so it just raises the question of like, we have to do the work of being able to separate what is fiction and is not, and even get down to the subtle nuances of what these messages are sending to us. Because if we don't, and we just sort of mindlessly check out, we have to understand that there's a product being delivered to us, but what is the message underneath it? Because otherwise we're being told who to cheer for and who to fear. And that's a very dangerous thing. But, I think awareness is 90% of the battle.
Well, also, again, I think that, and I think we've said this before with other like controversial moments in some of these movies. Like if you're getting your moral, like if your moral guidepost is, a superhero movie or a science fiction movie or something like that, then I don't think it's the movie's problem. I think you need to kind of find a better guideline for what
Right.
for what your beliefs are, what your, moral compass is, because it shouldn't be, you could take value. I think there's value in like, man, I really connect with, this character because of their belief, their personality, their drive, their whatever. But if that's your sole source for, doing the right thing or supporting this or that or being anti this or that, then I think that could be, you could get into a sketchy kind of thing with that,
Exactly. But audience, what do you think? Should the military influence our superheroes? Drop us a comment on Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube, and let us know your thoughts, because we'd love to hear them.
Yes, we would. We would like to hear them.
Speaking of awkward transitions into German accents. Would you like to hear this plot synopsis?
I would love to hear the plot synopsis.
Cue the foreboding music. Didn't work. Come on. There he is.
This is uncomfortable now.
There it is. Should I do the whole thing in a fake German accent?
Well, then it sounds like we're rooting for the bad guys here.
Yeah, and actually, I don't know if I could do it if I'd probably start laughing because your brother-in-law actually got me onto doing that because he does it so well.
Yeah.
I can't do it without laughing thinking of Kevin, so shouts out to Kevin.
Once upon a time, Captain America was in the ice, and he was frozen.
He was naughty. Here we go. Meet Steve Rogers, the human equivalent of a wet napkin. Tiny, asthmatic, and determined to join World War II, despite literally every doctor, recruiter, stranger, bully, and best friend in the country saying, "Bro, no." Enter Dr. Abraham Erskine, part brilliant scientist, part madman with a syringe, who looks at Steve and says, "Perfect. This tiny allergic noodle is exactly who we need to fight Nazis." They inject Steve with mystery juice and boom! Now he's hot. He's got abs. But instead of sending this super soldier to the front lines, the US government says, "Bro, no. Cool muscles, but go dance in tights." Cue the villain, with the most literal name ever, Red Skull. If you guessed that he's bald, red, and very angry, you'd be right. He also wants to use a glowing blue cube of destiny to blow up everything, control something, and monologuing so hard, even the cube is like, "Bro, no." With the fate of the war at stake and the plot that doesn't understand the term autopilot, grab a hot dog, some fireworks, and a bald eagle as America answers the question, can a human protein shake really do this all day? In Marvel's 2011 film, Captain America, The First Avenger. Dun 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 dun.
Nice, very nice. That was good.
Thank you. Thank you. Wet
As
noodles.
we said, we are covering Captain America, The First Avenger, and it stars Chris Evans, Haley Atwell, Stanley Tucci, Toby Jones, Tommy Lee Jones, Sebastian Stan, Hugo Weaving, and Dominic Cooper, and it was directed by Joe Johnston.
Joe Johnston, formerly of... I feel like he did something notable.
Yeah, I can't think of it offhand.
Clearly not, because I can't remember.
He did this.
Anyway,
He did this. What
one.
we're talking about today.
And there's some great stuff in it. Why don't you kick it off?
I am going to kick it off. Here we go. There is some really great stuff. Now, the first thing I got to say is not every movie does this well, but Marvel really started perfecting the putting special effects on the human form. And I think that the body double effect of skinny weakling Steve was done really, really well. This is right when they were starting to get into their sweet spot of doing the de-aging better than anyone else, doing some of the special effects better than anyone else. Now they've since started going into a more phony looking direction, but this was right around when they were really nailing it, I feel. So I really liked that effect. It didn't look like if you showed it to somebody who had never seen Chris Evans before, I don't think it would have been like, oh, that's clearly somebody else's head on someone else's body.
The only problem I have with it is, and this is a bad thing, how does the serum make him grow in height? Like, shouldn't it just enhance his muscles and his ability? Because he's clearly going from Hobbit to Abercrombie model.
Yeah, no, that's true. I'm not sure. I mean, it's OMG science.
To your point, the CGI is good. Looking back, it's sort of like, well, I'm having a hard time connecting to it because I know Chris Evans and I've spent 10 years with him as Captain America.
Right.
So it's harder. But in the moment, I do remember going, that's pretty good.
Yeah. Well, that's what I said. If you went in having never heard or seen, and this is your first thing you've ever seen, I don't think you would immediately know that it's not what he really looks like.
Yes.
Let's throw out Stanley Tucci, who is just
the hero.
Phenomenal. He's again, like, one of those actors that's great in whatever role you put him in, whether he is a main star or a side character or just a brief cameo. He always does a great job, and he's just really enjoyable in this. There's some emotional beats. He's very funny. It's just done really, really well. It's done really well.
He nails it. He nails it.
I love the look of Red Skull. I think they leaned into, Marvel had a tendency to, you saw this in previous movies like Whiplash in Iron Man 2. They didn't really lean into how he's supposed to actually look. And they didn't, lean into everybody's, true comic book form. But this is Red Skull steps right out of the comic, and they said, listen, we're not going to, play around with, oh, he's called Red Skull because he just wears a red mask the whole time. It's like, nope, he is a deformed guy with a literal red skull. And I appreciate that they did that. If you're familiar with the Captain America comic books when they first came out in the 40s, there's a very famous cover of Captain America punching Adolf Hitler in the face on stage. And they, again, pay homage to that as he starts doing the tours around the cities and the military bases, and they have an actor playing Hitler, and he punches him at every show. And I like those little moments, kind of like we said in Superman Returns when he's lifting the car, like the comic book cover. I like that kind of stuff.
They do that really well with the costumes in particular. There's so many different iterations of Captain America, and they grabbed some of the big ones just in his costume changes.
Yeah.
And I thought that they did that in a really clever way for the story. And I also love the leather jacket. I mean, it's phenomenal.
Love the leather jacket. So that scene when he's walking and he's got the leather jacket over the uniform and the helmet with the letter A on it. Great scene. Yep. Shows you get to meet the Howling Commandos. It's a little different than the comics, but I could have used a whole nother movie of the Howling Commandos. I think a movie of that team with or without Captain America would be a really fun movie. It would just be a really fun movie.
That to me is a Disney Plus series that they never capitalized on.
Absolutely.
It's right there. You don't need Chris Evans.
No, you don't. If you just do the Howling Commandos after, set it after Cap goes into the ice.
They actually had enough of a repertoire and a back and forth relationship in and of themselves that was pretty interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Where it wasn't just like, oh, this is Cap's team, and now let's figure out what they are. Like, no, they each had a specialty, and they had development that could have been. And I'm sure Marvel will hear this podcast and be like, you know what, you're right. Let's do that.
I mean, listen, you make the team leader Dum Dum Dugan, and you do other adventures during the war. Have them fighting aliens, have them fighting superpowered Nazis, have them fighting whatever. I think it just would be a lot of fun. I could have used more of them. A couple of really great cameos that I liked. One was a character and one was an actor. So when they're at when Steve and Bucky bring their dates to the Science Expo, you see the original Human Torch, which is the android in that red bodysuit in a big containment unit thing.
Yeah,
it's just a blink and you'll miss it thing, but that's another fun little because again, Johnny Storm, not the original Human Torch. The original was an android. And one of the girls who is on the date with them is Jenna Coleman. And if you're a Doctor Who fan, you know her as the best Doctor companion, Clara Oswald. So that was fun.
I don't know if you noticed, too, since you're talking cameos, Natalie Dormer's in there.
Yes, she's the one who kisses Steve from Game of Thrones.
She's Moriarty in Elementary. She's on Game of Thrones. Private Lorraine.
All right, so we talked about, the uniform is really great, that marching scene. I think the interrogation scene is really well between Tommy Lee Jones and Toby Jones.
Yes.
That is such a great, it's got intensity and you feel the stress of it, but also it's got some lightheartedness. And I don't know why, I just always feel very emotionally moved. It doesn't make me sad or happy, but It's just such a great job when he says, it doesn't matter if you believe it, because he can do it.
Yeah.
It's like, there's just like, the way he delivers that is so, like, just a great little piece of acting. And it's just really, really
He's
good.
full of conviction. And, you know, since you mentioned Tommy Lee Jones, I think he's phenomenal and criminally underused in this movie.
Oh, yeah.
His resolve, his snark, his comments, they're all just really well delivered. And it's like he's off in his own movie. He's
Exactly.
doing his own thing, and he just interacts with the main drama. But when he shows up, he just steals the show.
He does. He absolutely does. He's dry and fun and funny. He does a great job. And again, if they did more with the Howling Commandos, you could put him in there too. He could be the the liaison, the commanding officer, or whatever, and would be a great addition to that. There's one of the things I really like that you don't see in a lot of the other MCU movies, especially, is before he becomes a hero, Steve already has honor and nobility and that heroic side. They just enhance the heroism inside of him when he gets the powers. You know, when you see characters like Ant-Man, Thor, Iron Man, Captain Marvel, they're not heroes to begin with. Now, I'm not saying that they're not compelling stories, but they're very flawed. They're very selfish, self-centered, and getting their powers makes them better people, therefore making them heroes. But Steve would always, tried 5 or 6 times to get into the army, to get into the war, because he believed in serving. And yet he knew that, he had this, they list his ailments and diseases and whatever that's working against him. So I think that that's a really interesting thing, that they enhance the hero instead of turning him into a hero. They just enhance what's already in there, which is why he says, I'm not looking for a great soldier. I need a good man. This is a great war movie. I grew up on war movies, watching them with my grandfather, like older ones like Gunga Din and, The Bridge Over the River Kwai and all these kinds of things. And I think this is just a great World War II movie. Reminded me of Band of Brothers with a little bit of sci-fi thrown in there. So I thought that was really good. I think that it is condensed and contained. It doesn't drag on too long, considering that they could have.
Sure.
It stands alone. For me, it stands alone. If you cut out the beginning scene, if this was just the only movie and wasn't part of the MCU, this is a great just standalone Captain America movie. I think that it does that job really well. And I really like the fact that you see how young Steve sounds because he's not experienced yet. If you watch this and then immediately watch Endgame, say, you can hear the soldier in him in Endgame, that he is now, led teams into battle. He's gone through some things. He's, more grizzled without losing that like nobility. But you can see in this first one, the lack of self-assurance and the youth in his voice. And like, obviously, the actor was, 10 years younger, but I really like that you see the beginning of his development into the Captain America that we know.
Yeah.
And the last thing I have is the grenade scene. Is a great scene. Again, it just shows the honor that he has from the very beginning without being he didn't need to be made into a hero. He just needed it enhanced.
Well, he's still skinny.
He is still skinny. Again, that just shows Tommy Lee Jones' wonder and joy.
Yep. I only have 2 other things that you didn't grab.
All right.
I agree with everything on your list. This is where we first see the friendship of Steve and Bucky. And it's heartwarming, it's natural, it's compelling. And I forgot about that, right? Like, you get through Winter Soldier and Infinity War and Endgame, and then you watch Falcon and the Winter Soldier, you sort of forget that there was a deep brotherly love. and it's so well caught on screen.
And you also see kind of the shift in their relationship where you see Bucky saving him in the alley when he's getting beat up at the movies, and then you see this reverse of like where Steve kind of looked at Bucky as like the leader in their relationship. You see that shift where Bucky definitely starts to defer to him as kind of the driving force,
the captain.
Yeah, so it's a cool. That's definitely a cool shift to see.
Last good thing I have is I love the I need to get used to my body scene right when he's chasing after the Hydra agent after he shoots Erskine and like he's running barefoot through the city. Mm-hmm. There's this moment where he crashes into the shop, and it's because he has no control of himself. He has he grew like a couple inches and he's massive from a muscle standpoint, but it's not gear and it's not web slinging. It's him trying to figure out, how do I function in my new self?
Right.
And
I was
really
never able to run before, and now I'm chasing after a vehicle and jumping over cars and all this. Yeah. Yeah, you're right.
So I thought that was great.
Yeah, I did have that scene as well.
I've got two others, and I don't know what to do with them. So they're others.
You have others. I have some others that aren't really good or bad.
I sort of struggle with Steve just sort of knowing how to do everything once he gets the serum. It's like, I don't get the impression that you finished basic training, but now you know how to combat fight, knife throw, tactical strategy, battalion leading. Like, maybe it's the serum talking, but I could have used a little bit more training. Like, no, this is how you function. Not just, okay, we stabbed you with some go-go juice and now you're the expert level at everything.
Or at least after he was...
But he can't dance.
After he was transformed, it would have served to have some of that training stuff where even if he was great at it right away, having him be surprised at like, wow, I just threw this knife across the room and hit it, dead in the bullseye. So I would have been fine with suspending the disbelief, but you're right. Yeah. Something that showed like, why are you proficient in every weapon and know also how to fly a plane?
Just does
how to do all this
OMG
stuff.
Serum.
Again, just less than 5 minutes of a little quick, like, oh, I guess the serum also enhanced your knowledge of all these things. Okay, that's fine. But
yes,
tell me that.
The only other that I have is Red Skull just sort of disappears. It's like we paid it off 10 years later, kinda. But I remember watching it in the moment going like, so he died? And this is supposed to be a kid's movie. Name that movie.
Oh.
Audience, name that movie.
I know, I can hear it. This is a kid's movie. I can hear it.
He died? And this is supposed to be a kid's movie.
Muppet Christmas Carol.
It's Treasure Island, but yeah, you got it.
Muppet Treasure Island.
He died? And this is supposed to be a kid's movie.
Because they have a similar thing in Muppet Christmas Carol when he's like, are we sure this is safe for all the kids to watch? Oh yeah, this is culture.
Whoa, that's scary stuff. Hey, should we be worried about the kids in the audience?
No, it's all right. This is culture.
Oh yeah, this is culture. So Red Skull just dies, and like now we know that it's the Space Stone, and it probably teleported him somewhere else, but we didn't know that in the moment. And then literally the next film, the Tesseract is just the MacGuffin for all sorts of power. But it's like he even says Schmidt is dead when he's talking to Peggy over the intercom.
Well, he had no way of knowing otherwise.
Of course, but it's sort of like, look, and this is my main problem with Phase 1 and Phase 2 of the MCU when it comes to the Infinity Stones. They don't get cemented in their use until Phase 3, and it really just sort of like muddies up some of the story. But it's not worth me like getting upset about it.
I actually had that in my bad, that it seemed like he was such a big threat and then you didn't really see him explode. He just kind of
Not here anymore.
was gone. And like Steve didn't, mortally wound him and then he disappeared, would have been fine. But yeah, no, I had that in bad.
Yep.
Are you good with your other?
I'm done.
All right, I got a couple of other. I think that I don't know if you watched it, but I think that this movie utilized Peggy Carter far better than any episode of her TV show.
I never watched it, but I'll take your word for it.
It was fine. It was there. I think that Peggy Carter deserved, again, a Howling Commandos movie with Peggy in there would have been great. I think that we deserved more Peggy Carter. I always like these little foreshadowing things. So I like the Red Skull pin when he's wearing the Hydra pin and you see the blood splatter on the skull.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, I see that.
Wasn't that that actor in the opening scene
The
who
old
gets
man?
shot? Yeah, isn't he in Harry Potter?
I'm not sure.
I'll look it up. Keep going.
Look it up. I forget exactly what scene it is. I believe it's in the Hydra base, but you see, or maybe it's in the Shield base, but you see two soldiers walk by holding a giant arc reactor,
Yes.
or like what looks like a model of the arc reactor.
What will be?
So
Yes.
again, little like, we're gonna use this later.
When they're firing at when the Hydra agent's firing at Steve and he picks up the car door and it's got the star in the middle, using
again,
it as a
all that
shield.
kind of stuff. Yep.
Bucky, Bucky dying, but also holding the shield occasionally as a foreshadow, which they never pay off. And I'm not bitter, but I'm just bringing it up.
I'm bitter. And my last thing is I like the subtle little, again, if you sneeze, you'll miss it, dig at Indiana Jones.
I did like that.
When he's like, and the Führer just wants to dig in the desert. Like, yep, because that's what he does in Indiana Jones to find that, magic artifact. But Schmidt finds this magic artifact here instead.
Go, go, go.
Speaking of Schmidt, I like the detail on his makeup when he's wearing the human skin mask. You can see right along the side here, like some ridging and stitching.
The break of it, yeah.
Where it's like you could tell that like this was not his real face. And again, not a detail that everybody's going to notice. Not something you needed to include. But I appreciate the fact that you went that extra step. That was nice.
Back when Marvel paid attention to detail.
Back when Marvel cared about the stuff they were putting out into the world.
We've got an ad from our sponsor.
We sure do. When you've had a long day planning the demise of the world and your skin turns as red as a tomato, revive yourself with Hydra-tion. Our secret formula will make you feel like you have the strength of the gods and ready to win a war. No need to stress over the tesseractions of others. When you're revitalized by Hydra-tion, even if you lose, you'll win the war inside, refreshed by Hydra-tion. Side effects may include occult obsession, blue energy beams, skin irritation, and redness. I mean, extreme redness. Hydra-tion. We hail it.
Okay. It was good until you said we hail it, and now it's great. So I give it a ledger.
Oh, well, thank you so much. That's so nice. All right, before I get into this, I need to tell you how it's spelled because that will make a difference.
Understood?
So the product is called Hydra-tion, but it's spelled Hydra hyphen dration,
I would have, I'm insulted that you think you needed to explain that for me and that I wouldn't have caught it.
Listen, that's really the funny part of this. The rest of it is not desperately funny. It's okay.
Go for it. That was funny. That was very good, sir. But there are bad things in this film, and I'm here to talk about them. How much do you have? Because I have more than I thought I would.
I don't have a lot. I got a couple things.
You go for it first, and I'll clean up.
All right. Well, I mean, I had it in other, but again, I could have used more Peggy, and I could have used more Dum Dum Duggan. I think that was a miss to not have more of them, but we've talked about that. A logic question. Peggy just fires a gun at Steve holding the shield.
Thank you.
You didn't
What
test
the
it.
hell?
You had no idea what that was going to do. All you knew, and there's no indication that Peggy even knew what that Stark said. It's the strongest metal on Earth or whatever he says. So she's
And
fired a gun.
why?
What if it went right through it and you just killed the super soldier?
Why does she do that? Because he kissed another girl when they're not even together.
All right, I understand why she did it. It's the fact that she did it with no knowledge that the bullet was going to be stopped, and she was just sending him a message.
Again, the logic of this character and his character. Do you think he would just do this?
Yep.
It is just complete overkill to show that the shield works, but it really highlights that she's psychotic.
Yeah. I think it's a pointless opening scene. The finding the frozen ship.
I agree with that.
That's a pointless scene. Don't need it.
You don't need it.
It's just there. It's just there to take up time. Another logic thing of him being frozen. I don't really understand. I understand he brings the ship into the water and he's, over, I don't know, Antarctica or wherever he's flying over.
Yeah.
But I feel like he would have drowned before he was frozen. He wasn't why was he flash frozen like that? That whole thing never made sense to me for the character. It's not just the movie.
Sure.
Again, not really just a Captain America problem. It's kind of a superhero problem, but mostly a Marvel problem. Is you had the hero fighting his antithesis.
The bad guy is the good guy with powers.
Yeah, so I mean, yes, it was in the backdrop of a war and he had other missions, but your main villain is the bad version of your hero.
Exactly.
Why wouldn't they utilize the super soldier that they just spent time and money making? Now, I know Tommy Lee Jones says, I was promised a whole army of you, now I just got one, so we're going to send... But, why wouldn't you just use him for the most dangerous missions? Because he's got... you just saw a small glimpse of what he's capable of.
He chased down a car and pulled out a man from a moving submarine. You have no use?
After diving and swimming after that submarine... saving a kid, saving a bunch of people, using a car door as a shield and a weapon, jumping over those cars. That just didn't make any sense.
Go dance, monkey.
So something that I see in a lot of movies where, and now that I'm talking about it, I forget the exact scene, but there's a scene where Steve stops a missile from being released and hits it back into the ship.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know the science of how bombs work. And, I don't know if they all have to be triggered or because I know some movies you could do whatever you want with it. Other movies, they're like, don't touch it or you might set it off. But I find a lot of they're just lucky that bomb didn't explode because he didn't really handle that with a whole lot of grace or gentleness.
No, don't worry. He knows how to do everything.
And I said this already, I would rather have seen Red Skull be killed or be defeated rather than just an off-screen whoopsie. Don't know what happened.
Yeah, totally.
And the last thing I have is, I don't even know if it's necessarily a problem, but there was this almost heavy-handed emphasis on Steve's goodness as a person to where it was what is it that there's no explanation as to what it is that seemingly makes him more honorable and noble and moral than everyone else around him.
I agree with that, and I hadn't thought about it until you just said it.
But there was no explanation. Is it just because he's had to try so much harder because he's been so much weaker his whole life?
He's the underdog. He's the little guy. He's just a kid from Queens. That's what makes him good?
And again, I wouldn't have really been bothered or even thought about it if they hadn't really leaned into the fact that he was such a good person. It's why is he such a good person? If anything, I would be bitter and angry at being dealt this really crappy hand in life,
Yep. Agreed.
All right. I'm good.
Okay. Just a couple other things that I had. I don't like that it's called the First Avenger because it's literally never said. and it's used to set up the Avengers movie. It should be called Captain America, Please Go See the Avengers.
I mean, to be perfectly honest, it should have been what should have gotten that subtitle is Captain Marvel, the First Avenger, because at the end of that is where he comes up with the name.
Right.
That would have made much more
Avenger.
sense.
Yep.
Yeah, no, you're right.
I have a big moral problem with getting the flag scene. It's cheating.
Why?
And everybody just stands there and says nothing?
He didn't say climb the pole and get it. He just said the first person to get it.
No, yeah, but like even the lieutenant is like, how come I didn't think of that? Like, why is everybody dumbfounded by cheating? It was implied, climb it. And he also said nobody's gotten this flag in 17 years, which means somebody 17 years ago got it using that method. So it's implied and understood,
or somebody was strong enough to, pull themselves up the pole.
Right. So to the point you just made about his goodness and following rules and, being that moral compass and everything, he just broke the rules and everybody's just like, the skinny guy thought around it.
He didn't break the rules. It was creative. He was thinking outside the box. They never said,
and it's literally the only time
they never said the first person to get this flag by climbing up the pole wins. They just said the first person to get it. However you want to interpret that is your business. He just interpreted it differently than everyone else.
Well, then we need more examples of him thinking outside the box. We need more examples and more opportunity for him where there was a black and white issue and he thought around it. He literally never does that again.
I mean, you could say the grenade thing was him thinking outside the box. Everybody ran, he dove on it.
That's heroism. I see what you're saying, but I don't know. It just seemed like we're going out of our way for 3 minutes to point out his ingenuity, and we never bring that back up again.
Well, it's also so that Peggy can look at him and go, he's a handsome little fella.
Look at that guy. I feel, so you said you liked the skinny Steve and the Captain Steve, and you see the progression of his confidence as a leader. They actually seem like two different characters to me.
It's from movie to movie.
Yes, from movie to movie. In this film, there's a disconnect for me. They almost seem like two different characters because he's got this Brooklyn grit about him, which is awesome. And he's like, I'm not taking no for an answer and I can do this all day. And I'm just a little guy and I got to stand up and I got to support and everything. And then all of a sudden he becomes this polished soldier who's very reserved and just, very respectful and sort of classic America. I sort of think of like, kindness and moral uprightness, but there's sort of this difference. And I think there's a difference in confidence. Like the skinny version of Steve was like, yeah, we're just going to get it done. And I don't care what anybody tells me. But then once he becomes Cap, it's like, well, there's a right way to do this and there's a wrong way to do this. And there's a disconnect for me.
I see what you're saying, but also that's another example of him, thinking outside the box is, applying to be in the army at different places, changing his name, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, you're right.
But I also think that he has moments. I mean, he didn't exactly follow orders. His orders were to, promote war bonds, and he decided to run off and, plan a one-man rescue mission instead.
True.
But I understand what you're saying. I think that he loses some of the grittiness because now he has his new powers to rely on.
And the reason I bring it up is not like, oh, characters can't change and develop. I feel like Thor is a great example of a character developing over time. Tony is Tony. Like, he's Tony throughout. Yeah, there's character growth and realization, but he's still Tony. He never changes. He's true to himself. And in this movie, I feel like we start with a version of Steve, and then we land on a different one.
Okay. I mean, I can see what you're saying, but I think that whereas these other characters had progressive development, Stark needs to be kidnapped, told to build one thing, see the destruction of his weapons, build a really rudimentary suit, then develop it and develop it and develop it. Thor had to go from being a warrior to then being a disgraced god to then regaining his confidence and his, right to the power. Steve's change was instantaneous. He was given a serum. 2 minutes later, he was, super soldier man. So
True.
maybe that was part of it, was that he didn't really have the same kind of power development that some of these other characters had. But I also can understand what you're saying.
I think we all know this. Steve does not need to crash a plane to become a capsicle. He could have bailed on that plane at any point. He did not need to crash it. Point down.
Well, no, he needed to crash it because it was headed towards New York or whatever. So he needed to bring it down.
Yeah, but don't you think that just again, I know nothing about pilotry and aeronautics.
Pilotism.
Don't you think just letting go, turning the controls to go downward, and then jumping out with a parachute would have handled the job?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, I do. I think that if he had gotten himself ready and busted out the front window, got the parachute on instead of spending all this time chatting with everybody.
Yeah.
Busted out the window, put it in a nosedive, again, because he was a super soldier, he wouldn't have even needed to wedge something. They would just wedge the controls to go downward, then jump out that window. Then, if they can get a read on where you are, they can come to rescue you or whatever. But
Seems
even if they
simple to
didn't,
me.
that would have made more sense for him to be.
Oh, we lost him.
That would have made more sense for him to have frozen, because maybe he took shelter somewhere and froze. That would have made more sense than crashing into the water. So, yeah. No, I'm with that.
Two more. Let me preface this by saying, or if it's your first time hearing that word, let me preface this by saying, Erskine is my favorite. You didn't get it?
Preface. No, I like.
That's how you spell it.
No, I got it.
Oh, okay.
I got it.
Erskine is my favorite. I love him. He's the hero of this film. That said, he is just a copy paste of Yinsen in Iron Man.
But better. He's an improvement over Yinsen.
Way better. But it is. I was watching it. I'm like, I've seen this before. Where have I seen this before? And it was 3 films prior in Iron Man. It's a kind-hearted scientist who sees the best in our hero. He leads him down the path to becoming the hero and then dies immediately.
Yeah, but that's just a storytelling trope. You could say that about the scientist in Thor.
Yeah.
You could say that about Hank Pym with Ant-Man.
You can.
You could say that about.
What I'm saying is, I wanted an old man Erskine comic line where he just gets so over it and just starts killing Nazis. He injects himself with his own serum, becomes Captain Erskine. And then, I'm not bitter about your previous point in a past episode, but I do need to bring it up.
Okay.
That you don't need this movie to understand the Captain arc. I think everybody sort of knows Cap's origin. This is just an origin story. Now, I will say, trilogies are treated very differently in the MCU. There are stories that happen in between trilogies that no other trilogy ever does. Batman doesn't do it. Indiana Jones doesn't do it. Harry Potter doesn't do it. Stories are enclosed and they stay within the confines of those developments. Marvel doesn't do that.
Yeah, you can't really watch Captain America 1, 2, 3 in succession and really understand what's happening.
You cannot. If you tried to, however, the logic that you purported in Batman for Batman Begins not being necessary also applies here. You have a second sophomore film, which is far superior and amazing. Honestly, it's my favorite MCU movie, The Winter Soldier, and that can connect pretty seamlessly to Civil War because you've set up the relationship dynamic, but you don't need the origin story to actually be a part of the trilogy.
Okay, but the reason that I
There is
think
no difference.
the reason that I think you do is that aside from a something in the 90s, a made for TV movie in the 90s that I'm not sure even addressed Captain America's origin, is we'd never seen it before. Before Batman Begins,
Now you sound like me.
we had 5 Batman movies, 3 animated series, and years, decades worth of comic books, novels,
Yeah.
video games, all things that explained his origin. We had, if you went into Batman cold, you still probably would have heard of his origin based on all of the previous things. If you went into Captain America with no comic book knowledge, you would have no idea who he is, or where how he became.
Spider-Man does this in Civil War. There's no origin. He just shows up.
Because we had 6 movies previous and an entire animated series that tells us who Spider-Man was. So we didn't need an origin for him.
So what you're saying is if there's previous IP iterations of this, then we don't need origin stories.
When there's so much of it, like if they ever stop the MCU and they reboot and start from the beginning and they do Iron Man again, you don't necessarily need all of the growth of Tony Stark. There's, gonna be likely, there's at least 11, 12 years of Tony Stark's growth. I don't need him in a cave, him building a suit out of scraps, then him making another suit because he's super rich. I don't need it again.
Box of scraps!
With a bunch of scraps!
It's the same with Captain America. This was a great way to introduce the character's origin. I don't need another one of these. I don't need. You could just tell me a story of Captain America set in modern times, and I'm ready to go. I don't need the World War II, the weakling turned into the Superman, the heroism and Boy Scoutness. I don't need any of it.
You know what I need? I need some sweet, sweet spiritual content from my friend Chris.
Sweet spiritual content.
What do you got?
I got stuff.
I thought you were going to say I got nothing.
All right, so where I kind of landed with my spiritual stuff here was, how we talked about the weakness being made into strength. You have Steve when he starts off and he is weak. He is, looks malnourished. And despite being a good person, he's eventually made strong. So this idea of the weak being made strong. This is something we find as believers, something we rely on God, is that God takes the unprepared and uses them and equips them. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Are you saying this because this is the same thing you have?
It might be. Keep going.
Well, then we could just talk about it, but we'll see.
We'll just co-preach.
We'll see if it lands in the same way.
Yes.
So if you look at it,
if you're listening, we never talk about we talk about the theme of what our spiritual content is, but we never really run it by each other.
Yeah, no. So it's this will be the first time that we've really landed on the same idea.
Potentially. Wait, we still don't know. The tension is building.
You could look at a very famous verse, Philippians 4:13. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. But one that really I think is good is in 2 Corinthians 12, 9 through 10. It says, "My grace is all you need. My power works best in weakness. So now I am glad to boast about my weakness, so that the power of Christ can work through me." So it's the idea of what?
Not the same.
Oh, we're not leaning into the same thing. So it's when we recognize our own weakness and our own limitations is when we can see God's strength.
Mm.
It's not. It can be difficult to boast in your weakness. Nobody wants to show that they can't do something or that they're limited. We're people that humans love to be able to show that they can accomplish anything, overcome anything, but sometimes it's too much. Steve needed outside forces to guide his life so that he could show the strength that he had inside. And that's kind of how it works for us. There are areas in which we're weak, and there are areas in which we don't have the knowledge, which we don't have the ability, which we don't have the strength to pursue. But when we can recognize, I can't do this alone, I don't have what it takes to be able to do this, that's when we need to rely on God. And that's when God shows his strength through us. And in doing so, we're able to, or should be able to, recognize that it's God's strength and not ours. Steve knows that it didn't just take, months of him working out and going through basic training in order to become the super soldier. It took something supernatural for him to be able to be who he was. And for us, that's how it can look. And we need to recognize that sometimes, look, I wouldn't have been able to get through this if it wasn't for the strength that God imbued in me, that God gave me to rely on. I wouldn't have been able to make it through X. So that's kind of where I landed with this weak becomes strong theme.
Totally. And it's not the exact same passage, but it's definitely connected. Mine was about that perspective of recognizing where our strength does come from. And because you recognize that, you actually embrace humility. The line that it came from was, what makes you so special? Nothing. I'm just a kid from Brooklyn.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not a flex, and it's not false modesty. It's perspective. He never saw himself as the hero. He just knew that something was worth fighting for. And so when he shows up with everything he is. And it's through that the serum then, manifests all the goodness and the potential and the possibility. The verse that I got was 1 Corinthians 1:27-29, and it says, "But God chose the foolish things of the world to shame the wise. God chose the weak things of the world to shame the strong, so that no one may boast before him." And that's really where it starts in God's kingdom. It's all about humility. He doesn't call the impressive. He doesn't call the smart. He doesn't call the flashy. He calls the willing, and he empowers them. Those who say, I'm nothing special, but God, you can have all of me. And those are the ones that he uses to change the world. That's the boy with two loaves of bread and fish. That's the boy who then slays a giant. That's Moses, who doesn't feel qualified to lead people out of Egypt. And sometimes we feel the same way, that we're underqualified and we're overlooked. We've got nothing to offer. And that's good. That's exactly the kind of posture that God is looking for, and it's the kind of posture that God works through.
Absolutely. One thing I do want to add to that is, as somebody who was born and raised in Brooklyn, saying I'm a kid from Brooklyn is a major flex. So just want to say that it is kind of a flex.
All right. Well, I'm going to flex my bat rating now on you.
Before we do the bat rating, now I made a couple of little notes here because you wanted to stop our argument about whether the First Avenger or Iron Man is better, and you wanted to continue it on the show.
Yeah.
So here's why Captain America, the First Avenger, is better than Iron Man, the first Iron Man movie. Number one, better villain.
Point north.
Number two, now this kind of comes down to personal taste, but I think it's a much more interesting story. The World War II setting, better setting with World War II setting. The story of him gaining his powers, it wasn't a bad person becoming a good person. It was a good person becoming great. So much more interesting and not really done before.
Point north.
Better action scenes. Iron Man doesn't really have a ton of action scenes.
No, because it's an origin story and it's just basically getting used to the suit. That's the action. Point north.
Now, I will say that with that, the getting used to the suit, I will say point
It's iconic.
Point Monteleone, Iron Man did have a training montage to show how he gets better using the suit, whereas Cap didn't have one that shows how he gets better using his powers. So I will say point to you for that.
All right.
Better cast.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Now, here's the one where I really think you're going to argue. I'm not saying the character. I'm not saying the series. This movie, though, is more important to the MCU than the first Iron Man movie is.
Yes.
All right. And so now we can do the bat rating.
I think it's a knockout. My God. You've changed me.
Your whole life is a lie.
It's a lie. It's a dang lie. Okay. Now I'm going to rate this. This is not the best Phase 1 movie. This is not the best Cap movie. And this is not the best Marvel movie. It's still good, but it is not the best. For those reasons, I give it a Pattinson.
Okay.
It's good. I didn't love it at the time. I like it for who the character becomes. And there's a lot of really good things about the movie overall, but if you have to give it a rating, it's just good. It's not great. It's not unbelievable. It's not fine because of everything you just listed as to why it's better than Iron Man, but it's just good. And so it gets a Pattinson for me.
But Pattinson is that it's just fine.
No, Affleck is fine.
Pattinson is okay. Bale is our good. Keaton is great. Conroy is flawless.
Okay, then this is okay.
Okay. All right. I mean, that's fair. It's wrong, but that's fair. Now with the three things that you stated, I disagree because I think that other than the Avengers,
that doesn't count.
Which I think are kind of in there, which I kind of put all the Avenger movies in their own category.
Yeah.
So other than the Avengers, I think this is the best Phase 1 movie.
What about I Want My Bird?
From a critical, I want my bird. My bird.
My bird.
If I think about it critically, is it the best Captain America movie? No, but it's my favorite.
That's fine. But if you want to fight about what the best Cap movie is,
I will say that I'm
going to come out without the gloves.
There are things that I could argue that
because I can do this all day.
I could find reasons to argue that it's the superior Captain America movie, but I won't do that. But it's definitely my favorite Captain America movie.
Go home, North. You're drunk.
But you're right. It's not the best Marvel movie, but I would put this easily in my top 5 MCU. And I would probably put it in my top 10 comic book movies, but there's a lot of that to choose from, so maybe not, but I'm definitely top 5 MCU. This is a Keaton for me. It's not flawless. It's got problems, but I think it's just great. It's a lot of fun. It's different than all the other ones because of the setting, because of the type of story it is, because of what it sets up. So it's all Keaton all day, baby.
What'd you think, audience? Do you agree? Because I don't.
You should.
Drop us a comment on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube about all your thoughts about Captain America, the First Avenger, and thank you so much for listening to this episode.
Yes, thank you so much. And again, please go and find us on all of the socials, on the Facebooks and the Instagrams and the YouTubes at Sanctum Sanctorum Podcast or at Sanctum Pod, and you will find us and all of the wonderful content that we have available for your listening pleasure.
Tell the kids what they should remember.
Well, kids, here's what you need to remember. As you discover our show, we're geeks. We could do this all day.
There's no way this is better than Winter Soldier. There's no way.
Again, here's the reason. Here's one of the arguments I can make for it being better than the Winter Soldier. The Winter Soldier, you need this for Winter Soldier. You need why does this character matter? They were friends before. All right. Well, it doesn't see, but you see
that's all you get. That is literally all you get.
Because when you see this, you see what no, it's not, because you see the importance of Bucky in his life in this movie. That solidified. Like, listen, there are levels to friendship, right?
Yes.
So
there's like David and Jonathan level bromance. There's tolerance, and then there's what you and I have, which is just How can I annoy you the best?